This wasn't how I was planning on doing this. This isn't my vision. Is that really how I'm gonna start this video? Hi everyone, my name is Huddy or Huddy von Schland, and you might know me as a person who talks a lot about LA by Night. Recently, if you've been watching the Vampire the Masquerade TikTok, you might have seen me talking about Jeva a lot, Jasper and Eva of the Vampire the Masquerade TikTok. In November of 2019 is when I made my very first video about LA by Night, where I summed up the first 3 seasons in preparation of the upcoming season 4 in 2020. And so I thought it would be really cool if I made a timeline, a full recap of LA by Night, all 5 seasons. And I had this plan. I wanted to get a corkboard or a whiteboard and do it, real professional YouTube style. But the problem is I live in Germany, and apparently like cool big whiteboards are like reserved exclusively for teachers and schools and stuff because they are outrageously expensive. So I have to rely on this. This is what I gotta rely on. I got a green screen behind me, obviously, as you can see, because my hand disappears. We deal with it. We move on. That's how we roll here. Now, I've made a ton of videos about LA by Night. I've made full-on character profiles. I've made recaps of the seasons 4 and 5 every single episode. As I said, I made the first 3 episodes recap. I made an epicat. I made a recap about the WonderCon episode that didn't get filmed or got filmed, but like the film was bad or whatever, and has been removed from a lot of streaming services now. And I just thought it would be fun and great and good to have just a whole video dedicated just to the first 5 seasons of LA by Night. I don't think I'll split it up. I might. I don't know how long I'm gonna ramble because I'm not scripting this out. I don't do that. The only thing I've ever scripted out were lore videos that I used to make, and it killed my soul a little bit scripting out lore videos, so I stopped doing it. And all of my LA by Night videos were all just off the top of my head, my first thoughts, reactions, and feelings as I watched them for the first time. Now, obviously, I've watched LA by Night a million times at this point, especially because all the TikToks you see go up on Vampire the Masquerade channel are usually clipped by me, so I I feel like I know the show really inside out, but I don't think I've really dissected episode by episode, season by season, and really taken time to compare a whole lot of things. So that's exactly what I'm going to do in this video, and I hope you enjoy it. I hope you want to see it. If you don't, sorry about it. See you later. See you in the next video that I make, and who knows when that will be, because I am not consistent in my uploading except when it comes to games that I run, which you should totally watch because I think the chronicles that I run are pretty freaking cool. Also, I have no idea how long this is going to take me, so don't mind if in between seasons, for example, you see changes in wardrobe or changes in hair, because I absolutely can't sit for, which is why I wanted the cork. Okay, so I don't want to get into it. That's why I wanted to stand and why I wanted the board. But you know what? Whatever. It's whatever. So the first episode of LA by Night is called Mortal Stakes, and as I already stated, it sort of sets the foundation of the characters, the main characters, of the coterie that we're going to meet. I did it, actually. I found it's not a great picture, like, quality-wise, but I found one. So we get introduced to the main coterie, right? And from left to right in this picture, let's say, we have Victor Temple, the Ventru, Nellie G, the Toreador, we have Annabelle, who we'll talk about in just a second, and then we have Jasper, the Nosferatu. Removing Annabelle from the picture just for the moment. The coterie is essentially Victor, Nellie, and Jasper, and of course Jason there is the storyteller in the middle. The 3 of them are a coterie already established. All of them are at least 5 years old, already established. 5 years old meaning 5 years of vampire, not literally 5 years old. And they are tasked by the Baron of Hollywood, who, if anyone has played Bloodlines, you know who that is. That's Isaac Abrams. And he sent them to the campus of Griffith College because there's a possible masquerade breach happening here. A lot of the students of Griffith College are unfortunately reporting signs of being anemic, which is, very, very vampire coded, right? It's very obvious that someone is feeding off of them and leaving them anemic, and, hunters could get wind of that, or whoever could get wind of that, and that could be a problem for everybody. The 3 of them are tasked, Jasper remaining mostly invisible and on rooftops and such, whereas Nellie and Victor are more of the talking, charismatic, manipulative versions of, from the clans that they are, head around and start asking about these people who are reportedly being sent to the campus hospital or whatever for being anemic. And they do run into some people that do become somewhat relevant later, but not really. The only one I'm really going to mention is the band Sour Sugar. which Jasper does like view or witness performing on the quad or whatever. And one of the members, now there's multiple members of the band, but one of the members of the band is named Francis, and that's the only one I'm really gonna like make a point to announce. But Jasper witnesses these, and they play some sort of, I don't know. I'm not a music girly. I really don't know, like, I'm not a connoisseur of different types of music and bands and stuff. So, but the way Jason describes it is that it's very like the worst types of mashups you could possibly imagine, I guess. And Jasper witnesses them playing, gets very distracted by them in general. Whereas Victor and Nellie walk around. They go to a cafe, they go to the library, and eventually they figure out that the source of where these people are getting their anemia is coming from is they all met with someone named Annabelle before suddenly falling anemic. And eventually they're able to track her down, and she's not at her dorm. She's at someone else's dorm, a young man who's, I think his name's Chris, who's playing, that could not be his name at all. And he's a field hockey player or a lacrosse player or something like that. And they all show up at his place, and he's about to give his blood to Annabelle. And she is literally telling people, not that she's a vampire. Honestly, I'm surprised she wasn't outright telling people she's a vampire, because she figured it out pretty quickly, but we'll get to that. But she's telling people she has, like, you know, some sort of porphyria, some sort of really archaic blood disease, and she needs actual infusions of blood. So she's not biting people. She's actually asking for them to, like, donate their blood. And this plays into Annabelle Predator type, which is from the TTRPG book, the role-playing book. Obviously this is based off of Predator type. She's a consensualist, meaning she wants to get consent from people before feeding off of them, but that's neither here nor there. And they stop him and her just as this exchange is about to happen, and basically they scare the pants off of the lacrosse player, and they snatch Annabelle into the night, and they take her away and whisk her away because they have to take her to the Baron, who was the person who sent them there to begin with. I mean, she's in a state of disbelief that she's a vampire, because like anyone really would be. Watch any like TV show like The Strain or The Walking Dead, and there's always, this point, in the beginning that people are just not willing to believe in something outside of what they can understand, right? So that's pretty normal. But it becomes apparent that she has basically figured out that she is infected with some sort of vampirism of whatever variety it is. And she has told her girlfriend, and very likely also her boyfriend. I don't think it's explicitly stated that she's like, gone into full detail with Mark, but with her girlfriend Eleanor, definitely for sure, they both of them know in general that Annabelle can't go out in the day anymore, and Annabelle's heart doesn't beat anymore, and her skin's really cold. And when she starts talking about Mark, two and two come together that Victor's son's name is Mark, and this is his girlfriend. So Annabelle, who is now a vampire, is dating his son. Victor has gone through great lengths to keep both of his sons away from his unlife as a vampire or as a kindred. His two sons are Mark and Isaiah, I believe. I want to say it's Isaac, but it's not. I'm pretty sure it's Isaiah. And he's gone through great lengths of keeping them away from him and completely in the dark, no pun intended, all the puns intended actually, of what's actually going on with him. He's employed his abilities of dominate, of cloud memory to like just keep them as foggy as possible at all times when it comes to their dad. Basically, they think that their dad is just, like a deadbeat and like a piece of crap or whatever. And, that's fine by Victor, because if they think that he's a deadbeat, piece of crap, and they don't want anything to do with him and they don't want to be around him, well, that works out well for him, because then they're not going to fall into danger for being associated with him. But Victor's not happy when he learns that Annabelle has been dating his son, and Annabelle very quickly realizes that Victor is Mark's father. And she, of course, has a negative opinion of him because of the things that Marcus told her. Nellie and Jasper also are not super happy with Annabelle for different reasons. None of them are. All of them, for varying degrees. Jasper less so, but all of them have had instruction in the ways of being a vampire, and Annabelle obviously hasn't. And you'd think she'd get a little bit of slack for that, because she was basically turned and abandoned. I mean, she was turned and ran away, but like, come on. We're not going to split hairs over that. But no, there's not a whole lot of sympathy for Annabelle. They take her to the Baron. They tell her, like, to just tell the truth and to, like, don't, be a smart ass. Don't fuck anything up. And also don't tell him, tell him the truth in as much as the story of her embrace. But, like, don't tell him that, like, your friends know that you were a vampire, or that like you've been floating that word around. Unfortunately, Annabelle forgets that halfway through speaking to the Baron, because she has a Freudian slip out, and she says, well, we've done a lot of research. When she starts asking questions about her new condition, and it becomes made clear to her that she's dead and there's no going back, and she's a vampire now, and you just gotta sort of fucking deal with it, keep the masquerade, blah 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 blah. She says, well, we've done a lot of research, and she wants to ask him specific questions. Garlic crosses, crossing water, picking up rice, all those questions that come with, sort of the theories and tales of vampirism from around the world. And of course, Baron Abrams picks up on that very quickly. We've done research. And she attempts to lie to him, and it actually doesn't go as poorly as you would imagine. But I also think that Jason didn't want to outright kill Annabelle in just the first few minutes of the show. And I know Jason would probably say, like, well, no, everything, happens the way it happens, and the dice decide, and blah, blah, blah. But, again, as a storyteller, I know you don't want to kill. It's like killing someone in session 0. You don't want to do that. That's no fun for anyone. You spend a lot of time developing Annabelle, taking promo pictures, and... this other stuff. And Annabelle is very clearly supposed to be like the new person, like me. I really loved Annabelle because Annabelle was me. I am Annabelle. I knew very little about V5. My background where I come from was playing Bloodlines, getting a copy of V20, and then I never played V20. I played it recently, but I didn't play it back then. And then just reading the lore and making videos about the lore. I didn't know anything about V5 until, around this time, and then I was like, oh, this is the new edition, and this is the thing. I felt very a kindred spirit, if you will, pardon the pun, to Annabelle about those things. So even though she lies to the Baron, and the Baron can tell that she's lying, I'm sure he can. He doesn't give any of that away. He does instruct the coterie to, one, take her under their wing, so to speak, or bring her into the coterie, teach her the ropes of the masquerade, and, if she proves to be an issue, then, take care of her. Wink, wink. And then they also wanted, she doesn't know what clan she is, so Abrams needs to know what clan she is, and so he tells them to take her to Griffith Park, which in Griffith Park is another one of my favorite characters. I'm not going to put her picture up yet because she doesn't get a player until later, but Eva is a Tremere, or a blood witch, and she's one of my favorite characters ever. Maybe my favorite character. I think my tier list of favorite characters goes Eva, X, and then Jasper, but we'll see. She's obviously can, take a little sample, take a little thip of Annabelle's blood, and she can discover what clan she is. And she can cover a whole bunch of other things, but we're just going to focus on clan for right now. So they take her to Griffith Park, and here's an important point that's going to come in much later. And when I mean much later, it's going to come in and play in season 2. As they're in Griffith Park, something that Jason introduces is that Nellie is seeing ghosts. She wasn't seeing ghosts before this. This is towards the end of the episode, but at the end of the episode, when they're walking around Griffith Park waiting for Eva to appear from wherever she's going to appear, Nellie starts seeing ghosts in the park. Ghosts that look like her, or ghosts that looks like her, or ghosts that are calling out to her, and she feels very drawn to them. They meet up with Eva. Eva does her ritual of taste of blood, tastes Annabelle's blood, and realizes that she is a Bruja, or doesn't realize. Again, I need to make another point here, is that she informs everyone that she's a Bruja. Eva already knew Annabelle was a Bruja. I think this is one of the... No, so here's where things, in retrospect, is where I can go, oh, well, this is sort of the weird, shaky start to LA by Night. I think what's funny is I think Jason had a much different idea of who Eva was before Josephine got sort of control of the character. I'm using control in quotation marks because I really don't know when the input of Josephine started. I know it eventually becomes that Eva was given over to Josephine McAdam, but I think Jason had a much different idea of Eva, and here's why I say that. It again, we'll get to it. I promise. I know I'm jumping all over the place, right? This is why I wanted the corkboard. Whatever. Eva already knew who Annabelle was. When they rolled up into Griffith Park, Eva had already been in a room with Annabelle and had protected her with blood magic for Carver. She owed Carver a boon, and so she already had done that. And she already knew that Annabelle's a Bruja because Carver's a Bruja. She knew all about the circumstances of the embrace and everything. And she doesn't reveal that to anyone, I think, until the end of the season. Again, Jason is playing Eva at this point. And also, Eva goes to the Succubus Club. That's another thing I'm going to have to bring up. Eva goes to a thing, and it ends really badly with a lot of human death, and Eva doesn't seem all that fazed by it. And knowing what you know now of Eva, of the character that she becomes, she's much sweeter, and she's much more concerned about humanity, and she's much less prone to be the stereotypical, because she's trying to get away from that, the stereotypical duplicitous Tremere who, always has, who's always playing 4D chess, who's always like several moves above or beyond everyone, and is trying to like come at everything from all angles, while also, using their blood, boiling the blood inside of your body, that whole thing. So yeah, when they arrive and Eva says like, hey, you're a Bruja, she already knew. She knew the whole time, and she didn't tell anybody, and she didn't like give it away or anything. So someday I'll ask Jason about all of those juicy details. Maybe Jason will come on my channel for an interview, who knows. So Annabelle's a Bruja, right? And what does that mean? Well, it means that she's, the very stereotypical anarch character. She's, all about revolution. She's all about fighting the man. Also a philosopher, though. Also, deeply cares about, the well-being of other kindred and things of that nature. But there's no time to celebrate this new forming of the coterie because they are attacked in Griffith Park. Some SUVs and people with guns come in and attack them. We learned that Nellie has some blood sorcery. She uses Cling of the Insect, and so she's just crawling on top of I don't know the layout of LA. I've never been there, or I was there once when I was 11, and I didn't go to Griffith Park. I was sick the whole 3 days we were there. It's not important, but there you go. There's some lore. There's some honey lore for you. And she crawls on top of or crawls underneath like one of the gazebos or something like that. And okay, so I'm gonna be honest. The main plot of season 1, in terms of like, because every season sort of has a quote-unquote antagonist, right? And the quote-unquote antagonist for season 1 is technically this dude, and I'm gonna be real honest, I can't even remember his name in this moment, and I've watched this so many times, is this dude who is an enemy of Victor. And I assume that comes from Victor actually having a flaw, or B. Dave Walters, who plays Victor, having a flaw on his sheet that says like, this is the enemy flaw. What's much more interesting to me than that, and we'll cover that, it's whatever. It really doesn't amount to anything. But what's much more interesting to me is, Baron Tara is in the car. And we learn this because, they do engage in battle with these people who roll up, who try and take out Victor and his coterie. And Jasper jumps onto one of the SUVs at some point. He does get knocked off eventually, but he jumps onto one of the SUVs as they're leaving after the battle, or in the process of the battle. And it becomes, with Jason's description, becomes super obvious that Baron Tara Kearney is in one of the cars. So she's obviously working with this guy who hates Victor. Now, Baron Tara is an interesting character. Again, she doesn't really amount to anything, except for something that plays into one of the characters' backgrounds. But she is a canon character in Vampire the Masquerade lore. Tara was the Baron of San Diego, an anarch baron, and she, after what happened, V5 metaplot, right, is basically the Second Inquisition put, full gear into starting to really crack down on a lot of domains of vampires that have been run by vampires for a while. They're called the Second Inquisition because there was an original Inquisition in the Dark Ages, that really is what forced the formation of the Camarilla, and the traditions existed before that, like, keeping the masquerade and stuff, but really force the Camarilla to come into existence, and for there to be traditions that must be upheld by all kindred, Sabbat notwithstanding, but that's a different topic that's not important because there are no Sabbat in LA by night. And so she was the Baron of San Diego. However, something happened, likely this shift in let's call it cultural shift for Kindred, where she thought that the anarchs were not going to survive, or they were part of the reason why Second Inquisition is so prominent now in the modern Knights. Not all of those things are debatable, honestly, but she switched over to the Camarilla, became Prince of San Diego, and all it did really was cause absolute quote-unquote civil war, anarchy, terror in San Diego, with Kindred fighting, Second Inquisition showing up. It just caused absolute pandemonium there. And now she's in Los Angeles. She's fled San Diego. She has abandoned her domain. And she is now here in Los Angeles, apparently. That is much more interesting to me than Victor's enemy. Again, I'll look up his name. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. Who knows? But again, we'll get to talking about Tara a little bit later. So the coterie head back, sleep for the day, recover from their ordeal of everything. And then they sort of need to take care of these issues. They have one of the SUVs from the people who attacked them in Griffith Park. They need to sort of, make sure that the masquerade stays protected and safe, gunfire in the park and all this other stuff. So they go about trying to get rid of the SUV. They talk to Annabelle about, her phone usage and how it's like not appropriate, and she needs to be really careful. Jasper very quickly realizes that Annabelle is speaking to her girlfriend Eleanor via Spotify playlists. Like, she'll make a playlist with a name, and it's like a coded message that like Eleanor can decipher. I never really maybe it's just because of my autism, I never really got the messages that she was sending, and also I don't know music very well. Why is anyone listening to me? I'm so lame. Leaves her coded messages, and Jasper says that it is actually really clever, but she should be really careful because, like, the more people she has in her life that matter to her, the more likely it is that they're gonna die or get hurt, which is going to affect her humanity, which is going to affect her ability to not become a monster herself. And Jasper is one to talk, but we'll get to him later about his own thing that he does with someone who matters a lot to him. So in addition to getting rid of the SUV and all that other stuff around it, they also need to deal with Chris, the person who Annabelle was going to take blood from and who she was like, I'm sick and I need blood. They head over, and again, as I said, Abrams didn't make it outright known that he knew that she was lying, or didn't give her any sort of punishment for it. But when she goes to find Chris, she finds his brother instead at his apartment. He's like, yeah, Chris is dead. He was like run over. It was a hit and run. Someone like ran him over and killed him, and now he's dead. And it's not explicitly said or asked of the Baron, but it is implied that Baron Abrams sent someone out to purposefully kill this young man. So he's dead. And Annabelle sort of gets her first taste of what it really means to be a vampire, and what vampires what lengths they'll go to keep the masquerade. And it's fair enough. It's fair enough point, which we'll see later in season 5. But right now we're in season 1. In addition to that, they also were trying to figure out where these people came from. The people who were trying to attack them. And they end up getting to like a warehouse. And inside the warehouse, important to note, is there's lots of rats, like suspicious rats, like sussy rats, like not just regular rats. And quite clearly being controlled by something. We'll find out who it is later. But a lot of sussy rats. And they do find a duffel bag in there. The people who attacked them are no longer there. But they do find a duffel bag in there full of hunter weapons. And unknown that it doesn't belong to the people who attacked them. It belonged to the person who controlled the rats, but we'll get to that. And inside there's stakes, and what's most important is there's a gun with Ralphus rounds in it, or it used to be called Dragon's Breath rounds, incendiary ammunition. That's important. Let's remember that. Let's hold on to that thought. Because, Hunter weapons are dangerous weapons. And as they are making their way out to go head back to Victor's Club, which is sort of where a lot of season 1 takes place, most of the seasons take place in Victor's Club, like where they sit around and gab and share the hot vampire goss for the night, they do run into Chaz, who is Nellie's sire. Nellie used to be part of the Camarilla, and her sire was part of the Camarilla. Nellie has a very interesting background where she was, as Toreador do, they tend to embrace a lot more willy-nilly than the rest of the clans, because they are like sometimes so just swept up in the moment to being obsessed with someone, and then they'll embrace them, and then they'll realize, well, maybe they aren't so obsession worthy to begin with. Maybe that was an oopsie doopsie on my part, and then they'll sort of abandon them. That's not necessarily what Chaz did. What Chaz did is he found someone else to be obsessed with, another woman. And Nellie took umbrage with that, and she decided that she was going to abandon Chaz, leave the Camarilla. Chaz sent his new child after her, and Nellie diablerized her, which is when you drink the blood of another vampire to its entirety and take their soul. And sometimes Nellie still hears her inside of her mind. That is something else that can happen as a result. Diablerie is nasty business. Chaz makes it very apparent that he knows what Nellie did and is using this essentially to blackmail her in order for her to give him information about her coterie and the Anarchs in general. I can't remember if it's explicitly said by Chaz, but I think it's again implied that the Camarilla is rolling back into LA and planning to stay. Now, the Camarilla had left LA a significant time ago, and they came back a couple of times. So there was an Anarch revolt in the 1940s, some point in the 1940s, and it was, a big deal and so successful enough that they were managed to get rid of most of the Camarilla that were in Los Angeles, and it was essentially turned Los Angeles and other parts of Southern California into what's called the Anarch Free States. However, in the 2000s, as per the Bloodlines game, the Camarilla did roll back into town and attempted to establish themselves. The Anarchs that were there and running things, Therese Vorman in Santa Monica, who we'll also talk about at some point, the Malkavian, and Nines Rodriguez, and they did attempt to, quote-unquote, remain friendly is not the word that I want to use. They didn't outright start, brawling in the streets with the Camarilla. I think even saying the word that they tolerated them is being too generous. And Baron Abrams had no problem telling the player character in Bloodlines how much he hated the Camarilla. Tolerated is probably even being too generous, too nice. But they didn't outwardly try and kick them out. And they didn't really have to, because the Camarilla ended up imploding anyway, based on the events of Bloodlines 1, because LaCroix is maybe the most incompetent venture that ever existed. And so now we're fast forward here, I think it's supposed to be 2018. So fast forward to almost 20 years, almost 15 years later. And they are back in town to try once again. He doesn't say specifically who is attempting to declare praxis, which is the name for when a prince becomes prince of a domain, or when they declare themselves thus, because that's how it works. But he does imply that he's still in the Cam, and the Cam is coming back to Los Angeles, is ready to take back what is rightfully theirs, what was theirs for a very long time, before the Anarch Revolt. Towards the end of that second episode, Jasper had really... one thing that you need to know about Jasper is that he's always hungry. He has a very particular predator type, which we don't know about yet, but I'm going to reveal it right now, and we'll talk more about it later. Jasper's a blood leech, so it's harder for him to feed like the rest of his coterie, and therefore, using his abilities, or just in general, because the way the hunger dice system works in V5 is you're rolling rouse checks a lot more often, which different than V20 and other editions, where it's sort of more like blood accounting. You're keeping track of blood points of how much blood you spend to do this, that, and the other thing. Making rouse checks sometimes just has to happen just in play, and so your total is 5 hunger, and Jasper's hitting 3 and 4 hunger, and sometimes even 5 hunger all the time. And he does in this when they're meeting with Chaz, and he takes him to a club or something, and Jasper's trying to remain like invisible, and he's trying to like rely on his natural instincts as a Nosferatu to be invisible and quiet and stealthy and all those other things, because he doesn't want to be around a crowd of people. He also is a masquerade breach in and of itself, just the way he looks. He ends up getting really, really hungry. And he wants to eat Annabelle. Like, he's like super into the idea of eating Annabelle. And she goes after him. He flees from the club. He doesn't tell anyone what's going on. He heads down to the sewers. And Annabelle flees after him and spends quite amount of time. She gets lost down in the sewers trying to find him. He doesn't stop to help her because he knows he's going to eat her. And he doesn't tell her that. So Jasper, now I think in real life, Alex Ward had other things that he was doing because he's an actor. Most of them are actors. But that's the reasoning they give for Jasper not being in the next couple of episodes. And so after all this, Victor and Nellie throwing a little party at Victor's club. Victor is a music producer, and he has a new artist that he's sort of premiering called Chocolate Drop. And he wants to have a little party, I don't even know what you call it. Like an introduction party. I don't know what you call it. I am a loser. So they're all there, Annabelle, Nellie, and Victor, and X shows up. He's a Malkavian from Santa Monica, and so technically he's not under Baron Abrams like the rest of the coterie who live in the Hollywood, and they live in the Valley, which is apparently, I don't know the layout of LA well enough to know like if that's a weird for that to also be included in his domain, but it is for the moment anyway. And X is a friend of Jasper's, and as a favor to Jasper, Jasper asked X to just sort of like watch Annabelle and like teach her things in his absence. And it's hard for a Malkavian to teach other clans things, especially baby vampires, fledgling vampires like Annabelle, because they see the world, anyone who knows what a Malkavian is, they see the world differently. They see the world through a shattered mirror. Their very embrace shatters them. That's why their clan symbol is that. He's just such a delight. I love him so much. There's this funny trope in the Vampire the Masquerade community of a fishmalk. And it comes from this idea of that, like, you run up to someone and smack them with a fish and just to be goofy, silly, just a silly, goofy little guy. I've seen some comments of people back in the day when I was looking into LA by Night that people thought X was going to be a fishmalk, and then they were pleasantly surprised that he wasn't, and that's exactly the way it is. I would say in the these first 2 episodes that he appears in, it might seem like that's where it's going, but it becomes pretty apparent that Xander Jeanneret is actually probably one of the best actors that they have at their disposal in the By Night series, and does just the most terrific job as X. And he does teach Annabelle some things. He imparts to her the wisdom of the Malkavians in the Elephant and the Bats story. I think for just as a treat, like a reward, I might read that out to you, actually. This is from the revised edition Malkavian clan book, so I'll go ahead and read this, or I'll leave it up here. You can read it along with me. The blind bats and the elephant, and I can't really read this properly, that might be that be cheap metaphor for non-objective reality. It says something like that. I don't know. It's kind of a bad copy, even though I got it from Drive-Thru RPG. It's old. Once upon a time, there were 7 blind bats, or 13, I forget. Anyway, they were a bit hungry for fresh blood because they were vampire blind bats. So they looked around for something to bite, except they couldn't look around as they were blind, which you should have realized already. But their unerringly keen senses of smell led them to a plump, juicy, blood-filled elephant, which in this story stands for all of reality. Got it? The gangrel bat bumped into the tail and said, "Aha! This elephant is really a twitching animal. That is what I shall become." The Bruja broke his fangs trying to bite the hoof and said, "Aha! This elephant is like a hard, stony, insensate pestle that crushes all beneath it with pitiless abandon. That is what I shall become." The Nosferatu flew into the elephant's butt and said, "Aha! The elephant is really a wrinkled, stinky, puckered, desiccated mass that lives in a dank cave. That is what I shall become." The Tremere bit the head and said, uh-huh, the elephant is really a puny little brain struggling to control a vast and powerful body. That is what I shall become. The Ventrue felt the legs and said, uh-huh, the elephant is a really powerful, upstanding pillar that can bear all weight with strength, but with very little suppleness or resilience. That is what I shall become. The Toreador felt the trunk and mouth and said, uh-huh, the elephant is really a great firm shaft or a warm, moist hole. That is what I shall become. And the Malkavian bat, blinder than all the rest, swooped down and managed to miss the entire elephant. Aha, said the benighted Malkavian as it flapped past. The others are making a huge fuss over an elephant that is really a big lot of nothing. Well, that is what I shall become. And so I say unto you, flap on.
All right, there's this elephant. That's reality, right?
Uh-huh.
You're following?
Yes.
The elephant represents reality. It's like a metaphor, a simile, or one of those, right?
A metaphor. If it's
Or
a simile, it
one
says
of
like
those.
or as.
It's
Please
like a
continue.
simile.
That's a simile.
Moving
Can
on.
we get to the point?
So there are several bats. Let's call them vampire bats, right? There was 7. Then there's 13. Maybe could even be 5. There are bats that are coming and they want to feed on this elephant. Okay, they're hungry. They want that elephant juice, which is reality, right? The Bruja bat is coming to partake in the elephant.
That's me.
That's you. The Bruja bat. All of these bats, they can't see. They're vampire bats, right? So they're sensing. The Bruja bat only senses the elephant's foot.
But vampire bats aren't blind.
That's not the point.
Just go with it.
It bites the foot. It breaks its fangs.
It's a metaphor.
Or a simile. It breaks its fangs. Ow, oh no. So now the Bruja thinks, the elephant, aha! This elephant crushes others with its hard feet, with no regard. So I will be like that too. The Toreador bat encounters the elephant in a different way. The Toreador bat encounters its trunk and its mouth, and it says, aha! This elephant is a hard shaft, or a warm, moist hole. So I'll be one of those.
That's definitely what Toreador are like. Yeah, no, this story makes a lot of sense now. Yeah, I'm with this.
The Ventrue bat comes through and it encounters the elephant. It encounters the legs of the elephant and it says, these are strong pillars that are holding everything up. Everything. Money, power, all of it. I, too, shall be like that. Aha! The Nosferatu bat unfortunately enters the elephant through the anus. And it says, aha!
And it's a valid point of entry.
The world is a dark, stinking cave, and I will live that way.
I wish you'd been here 3 nights ago. This all would have gone a lot smoother. Yeah.
Okay, so basically all the plans represent different aspects of the reality
No,
of...
they're bats.
Okay.
And they're blind.
So all the different clans represent... Okay, no.
The
All right.
Malkavian bat,
Okay.
however, the Malkavian bat soars past the elephant. It doesn't even encounter it. And it says, aha! This thing that all the other people are obsessed with is nothing. It doesn't exist. It's incorporeal. It doesn't matter. And we are right. Now, there's a very valuable lesson in there. Do you know what that is?
Drugs are bad?
That is a valid point for some people.
The different clans see being what we are is a different way.
Is that the lesson?
That's what I got from it.
Well, I was hoping that you knew.
So Xander being there at the club, is just a great, refreshing thing to be happening. But it's also important to know that at the club, during all of this stuff happening, Victor does miss Chocolate Drop premiering her song, her first performance under the Temple of Boom record label. That does happen. That's all missed. In the basement, remember they went somewhere, they got hunter weapons, and then there were sussy rats, right? Well, the sussy rats followed them to Victor's club, and they're now in the basement. And Annabelle and X sort of wander around, head into the basement, and they see that there's someone down there, and she's got red eyes. And it turns out that her name is Ramona. Again, these are moments for lore nerds like myself to kick and scream and squeal. Ramona is a gangrel, and she's featured. She's like signature gangrel character in like the older editions, revised and 20th. And she has huge things that have happened. I'm not entirely sure if when Jason portrays Ramona, if like she's just downplaying how great she is, in order to not like, in order to stay humble or something, or if like the clan books stuff that happened in the clan books isn't necessarily canon. Now the clan novels, I should not say the clan books, but the clan novels is not canon. If it's not canon, I would not shed a single tear, but that's a topic for something else. But if they are canon, I'll just go off the assumption that Ramona is just cool, is just so cool that she can't even be bothered to talk about how cool she is. She's seen a lot, done a lot. She's a native of Los Angeles, but she left Los Angeles and went to, I believe it was New York. She got caught up in sort of this quote-unquote final night's catastrophe thing that was happening with the Sabbat attacking the East Coast, and this really weird Toreador doing really weird things with an artifact he shouldn't have had, and essentially she's responsible... She's one of the people responsible for quote-unquote saving kindred kind as we know it at the moment. Again, she knows who Beckett is. She and Beckett have sort of palled around a little bit. Pal might be being too generous with that, but she's a super cool, like, really important character if some things are canon. If they're not, that's also fine. She's still super awesome. And she's like, hey, I'm Ramona. I am, an anarch from way back in the day. If you guys are like, you should know that, like, hunters are around, and, like, the Camarilla is going to come back around, and, like, if you really want to be anarchs, like, then you really have to be more like, Jeremy McNeil and Theo Bell, and Theo Bell, again, is also someone that she knows. And again, he's sort of the catalyst for, like, the War of Ages, where the anarchs are, once again rising up against the Camarilla, sort of a la the first, that's sort of how the first Inquisition started, because the anarchs, the younger, were rising up against the older, and then all the humans started to notice, and then, the church started to notice, and that's how the Inquisition started, and it's sort of happening again, right? Theo Bell, when the Second Inquisition, started, I think they blew up the Chantry, the Tremere Chantry in Vienna, and then they had, like, a conclave in Prague to, like, talk about it. And it became pretty apparent, like, the Camarilla trying to point the humans at the Sabbat to, like, get rid of them and do their job for them, caused these issues. And Theo Bell just sort of walked up into the conclave in Prague and blew off, the head of the Camarilla's head off, Hardestadt. All these, she's sort of, like, trying to impart on them that, like, shit's about to get real, and, like, she'll be around for when shit gets real, but, like, she's not really sure if they're, the ones up to the task. It's basically, she's very mysterious, very cool, also, she's very cool. Is it obvious how much I like her? She's also, I'm pretty sure, like, canonically gay. Again, if the clan novels are canon, she's, like, very, very, lesbian coded, and I appreciate that as a lesbian. So anyway, the party goes on. Victor says, like, Ramona can sort of just, they also have, like, another shared domain at Griffith College, and he's like totally take our, shared domain at Griffith College, get yourself settled in now that you're back in Los Angeles, or, like, you're gonna stay in Los Angeles, whatever. We'll chat after my party. And she's like, fine, cool, sounds good. So the party, so they head back up to the party, whatever. Ramona leaves, and the party gets pooped on again, because Baron Abrams shows up. He doesn't show up alone. He shows up with an entourage. He shows up with this Bobby Blaine person, this enemy of, see, I remembered his name. See, look, I wasn't even trying to, and I remember his name. There we go. This Bobby Blaine... God, this Bobby Blaine person that is an enemy of Victor's or whatever. And that's why the hunter's weapons are there at the warehouse, because he's selling everybody out to the hunters. They don't know that yet, but that's what he's doing. Whatever. And he shows up with Baron Abrams because Baron Abrams owes him, like, a boon or something. And for whatever reason, Baron Abrams, I'm not sure if Baron Abrams or Bobby Blaine has Isaiah, but one of them has Victor's other son, Isaiah, in their entourage for some reason. It's not really explained. I don't really know why, and it's not really super relevant. I'm going to be super honest with you. But in addition to them sort of pooping on the party, showing up and sort of ruin the vibe, then Tara attacks, right, again, with with some other people. Like, again, I have to assume that Bobby is playing like all sides of the insert that meme here from It's Always Sunny.
The reason I'm telling you all this is because I'm playing both sides so that I always come out on top.
He's playing every side because, like, obviously he's like selling people out to the hunters, and he's probably going to work with the Camarilla, and he's going to, you know, get things from Abrams. Like, you know, he just wants to survive, right? He's just a survivor at heart, the boy. And Tara attacks. She's a gangrel, so she like attacks with a bunch of birds using her animalism discipline. It's just mayhem, right? Pandemonium happens all over again. Oh, and Isaiah's also a twin, so like at first Annabelle's like, oh my god, Mark, but no, he's not Mark, it's Isaiah. Eventually they clear everything up. They don't capture Bobby, they don't capture Tara. Victor's like, you know, look what you're doing, you know, you working with Bobby, and obviously he's betrayed us to the Camarilla. We found hunter weapons in, like, you know, where he was hiding out in his warehouse or whatever, you know, and you're like in league with him. And Victor basically uses exactly what the Venture should do in order to, one, get his son freed from whoever's service he was in, Baron's or Bobby's, and two, to get control of the valley, to become a Baron in his own right. So he becomes Baron Victor Temple of the Valley. And you can sort of see Jason's face during this exchange, because I don't think it was planned. And again, maybe one day I'll ask Jason to like come to an interview on my channel and I'll just like fangirl all over him. But I don't think it was planned. I don't think it was something that Jason thought was like gonna happen. Like maybe Jason thought like it would happen like in another season, but not like in episode 4, which is when it actually happens. And Abrams, you know, this doesn't endear Abrams anymore to Victor. As I said, Abrams was already hard on Victor, but also sort of looked at Victor as like the leader of the coterie. He looked at Nellie as sort of like his, I know it sounds weird, but like sort of like his girl. And that's because Nellie used to work for him, like, or does work for him like exclusively. Like she works with the coterie, but she also like works for him exclusively. Like she does like she did like assassin work and like, you know, subterfuge work for him. That's why she knows blood sorcery. He was able to sort of like get her trained in that, you know, for work that he wanted to do, whatever. She's like a thespian spy, I think is what he refers to her as. But yeah, he gets control of the valley, which includes Griffith Park, from Baron Abrams, and becomes Baron Victor Temple of the Valley. And yeah, that is sort of where, and you know, X is also there. Everyone misses Chocolate Drop's performance. He convinces Isaiah to get on a plane, and go to Vancouver, I think, go to somewhere in Canada, and like just get away from all of this and like stay away from him. I'm not sure if he clouds his memory or not. Even if he did, that only works like in a very short time frame, so it wouldn't really be like, obviously Isaiah knows about vampires. But he just wanted to get away so like no one can hurt him, or like nothing can blow back on him, I guess. So after all of that has settled and all of that has happened, we finally get to meet Annabelle's sire, Carver. We've heard about Carver before. People have mentioned Carver. Abrams knows who Carver is. Eva knew, but she didn't say so. Ramona settles into the Griffith Park, and again, as cool as she is and as great as she is, as much as I like her, she's not super relevant. She's relevant for one thing, really, and one thing only that's, like, really directly tied to her. Like, she's around, and she, like, helps mostly Annabelle. Like, she mostly just becomes Annabelle's bud. Maybe Annabelle took a Erika Ishii took a Malwa dot on her sheet, and that's why she has Ramona, like, just, like, around for advice. I know for sure Victor took a Malwa dot to have fucking Fiorenza Savona as his Malwa. And again, as much as I love Fiorenza, not super relevant to like what happens in LA by Night. And it's weird to say that, because if you had asked me before LA by Night had ended, I'd be like, Fiorenza Savona is like, you know, she's like such an important character, but really she's kind of not important at all. I think I could talk about all of LA by Night and never mention her. I did though, so here we are. Now, Carver is played by Taliesin Jaffe of Critical Role fame. Ooh, I know, amazing. So amazing you can't keep focus. But you know, yeah. God, I wish I could say like he's like a super relevant character and super important. Again, no, not really. He's Annabelle's sire. His motivations are never really revealed. We can only infer things from what he says and does. He was in Los Angeles. He had seen Annabelle and her friends, meaning Mark and Eleanor, sort of like, being the little activists that they are, and burning down stuff and burning down buildings of this dude who, is a kindred, and he owns these buildings, and he's got his pockets and everything, and this vampire killed Annabelle. Again, I don't remember his name, because it's not super relevant. She ends up killing him later, I think. It's not super relevant. Really, it's not. So sorry. Anyway, and so, the vampire kills her for what she did, and Carver happened to be around, and he saves her. I don't know how much of any of this I believe. Honestly, Carver's the type of character where you can't really believe anything he says, but also you should take his words seriously, if that makes sense. They run into him on the Griffith College campus. There we go. And he's like, I don't know what he wants. He's like there to sort of so Sour Sugar, right? That band that was terrible that I mentioned first episode. They're apparently a bunch of thin bloods. This is a thin-blooded band. And he's there to get information from them and ask them stuff or take stuff from them. Not really sure. But, he confronts Annabelle and he lets Annabelle know that she was going to die anyway and he saved her and she can be pissed at him. Whatever. It's cool. And Annabelle hates him for killing her or making her into a vampire and not just letting her die. And he's like, that's your prerogative, babe. You do you, I'll do me. I did my part. If you don't like it, hey, if you have an issue, here's a tissue type of attitude. But he says someday, everyone's going to let you down and then I'll be the only one that you'll have and reach out to me on that day. But he's here investigating the Thin Bloods, right? And he tells them about the Thin Bloods, the Sour Sugar people, blah, blah, blah. And they're handing around a drug on campus. They go and they follow them back to the house that they live in, the Sour Sugar people, and they get there and they're Thin Bloods, right? So they're doing Thin Blood alchemy, and they got Instapots and pressure cookers, and they're boiling down stuff, and they eventually realize that a bunch of people are in there and messing around with their stuff, and so they start utilizing those abilities, moving them with force of mind and other things that you can do with Thin Blood alchemy. Francis escapes at the very least. I don't think anyone else makes it out unalive. Jasper accidentally kills two people who weren't Thin Bloods, who just happened to be there. I think they hang out there and donate their blood to the Thin Blood alchemy and stuff. Again, a masquerade issue. Jasper doesn't mean to kill, he just wants to knock them out, but he knocks their heads together so hard that he murders them both, so that's a problem. That was an issue. And really all that Carver cared about was getting their alchemy recipe book, which he took and then pieced out of the thing. Now, I don't know what Carver's motivations are. I still don't know. He mentions at one point to never make a deal with Beckett. And I know Beckett is basically a vampire archaeologist, he's a vampire Indiana Jones, and also he's one of Dracula's brides, but that's neither here nor there. He's really got an interest in Thin Bloods, that's made pretty clear, even in the Bloodlines game, that he's Thin Bloods fascinate him. He thinks that they're important for something, or that at the very least they're a new evolution of vampire, or whatever. He's just got he's super hard on for knowing what they're all about. It's mentioned one more time after this when they meet a Tremere who's from San Diego, and we'll get into all that. Who had a love interest who was a Thin Blood. We don't ever meet him or anything. But she ran into Carver there with the Thin Bloods, and he was asking questions about them and asking them about recipes and stuff. So I have this theory that Carver and Beckett are working together to know something about Thin Blood alchemy, or to just gather more information in general, or that he might be doing that with Beckett, but it's also Carver, right? There's also indications moving way into the future into season 4 that also he thinks he has his own reasons for being into them, because he thinks that they could be useful for blowing up Camarilla domains during the daytime, because some of the Thin Bloods can go out during the day, or he thinks that they're so numerous and they're so varied that the Camarilla can't prepare for assaults that they can perform in various ways. So I think it's both. I think it's that those are his motivations. I'm not really sure. But that's our first introduction to Carver. Annabelle hates him. Carver is super nonchalant and whatever about it. Victor doesn't seem to hate him, and neither does Jasper. I just really like Carver's character. I wish Carver could have been like a huge presence across all the seasons. I don't think he makes another appearance until season 4, unfortunately, and then he's again in season 5. But I think that had more to do with like Geek and Sundry and Critical Role stuff. But, you know, honestly, Taliesin Jaffe plays him in the best possible way. I love Carver so much. I could sing Carver's praises forever. He's just such a unique, cool written character. I'm sure he's a terrible person. Jason has mentioned multiple times that like Carver's like one of the worst NPCs he ever made, like background wise, but like whatever Taliesin does, whether Talisin's just so charismatic or just so good with the vocal or verbal sleight of hand that you just don't notice, I don't see him as being necessarily like a terrible person. I mean, I can see him doing terrible things, obviously, but I would love to know at some point like what made Carver so terrible, so awful. The next episode, I'm not going to talk super in depth about because it features an actress who got into a lot of controversy not that long ago. And I'm just not going to talk because her again, even if the actress did not get into any sort of controversy that caused any issues for anyone, her character's super irrelevant. It's just super irrelevant. God, there's so many differences to running an actual play, and especially running an actual play at this freaking caliber than it is doing a home game, because you have so much time in a home game. You know, I run actual plays, but I don't run actual plays at this caliber. But like, I know myself that like, I say to myself, all right, we got 10 episodes to do this because I got to move on to other things. I have other things I have to do, or other games that I want to run, or other responsibilities that I have, and I can't, and also editing takes time, and music choice takes time, and blah, 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 blah. So we can't have every plot thread perfectly wrapped up in a nice little bow. In a home game, you can. You can spend years delving into everyone's things all the time about everything. But there are so many plot threads that are introduced that just go nowhere, and that's just the name of the game. That's just part of it. So, like, when I say, like, in the long run they don't mean anything, I'm not saying anything negative about the characters. I feel like I need to make that clear. Or saying anything negative about Jason introducing them, because, like, it's sort of what you do as a storyteller. You sort of like throw a lot of stuff out and you want to see what the players want to interact with, and then you can move on from there. But this character, Miranda, doesn't really matter super a lot. She is in part of the ministry, and she has a club called Le Chat Noir that they're going to go to, and they're going to go and meet her because Victor's trying to establish himself as the Baron of the Valley, right? And he wants to meet with the ministry, their own little group there, that he's like, well, you're going to be under my domain, and we'll have a working relationship. You don't want to be an anarch, fine, but you still have to sort of pay homage to your baron, and kindred politics, all that good stuff. Fiona is also there. Fiona is a Ventru. She works for Baron Abrams, and she's also there to make sure that Victor does a good job. Like, Baron granted him the domain, but also is doesn't trust that Victor knows what he's doing, and that's a fair enough point, but Victor's never been a baron before. So he sent Fiona there to sort of micromanage him and just to observe him and see how he's doing. Jasper's also not here. I don't remember the reason for Jasper not being here. Whatever reason they gave. Again, Alex was busy doing something. I think Jasper feeling bad about killing 2 people was the reason they gave. Whatever. So they go to the Chat Noir. They kiki. They have a good time. It's very ministry, so everything's very sensual and everything. And there's long conversations about what the ministry believes and how they believe their god lives in their blood, and how in order to their whole thing is about giving into temptation, because the only way you can conquer things that tempt you, or your vices or whatever, is to give it. That's sort of a whole ministry. That's their vibe. That's their belief system. And what's pertinent, though, is that the guy who killed Annabelle before Carver embraced her, I think he's a Nosferatu. I still don't remember his name. He's there for some reason. I don't know why. But Annabelle kills him, like, in retribution. And also he says something about Jasper. That's also important. He's like, oh yeah, and your friend Jasper's in danger. Your friend Jasper's, something bad's gonna happen to him, and he's, lives under Griffith Park in the sewer system, and you better go check on him. But then Annabelle kills him anyway. She's like, well, you told us everything we need to know, and we will go check on him, and, up yours. And then she feels real bad about killing a vampire. That's one of the there's certain Annabelle is one of those characters where people like do not give her enough grace, because they're like, well, what does it matter? She's just killing a vampire, and that doesn't matter in V5, like that won't affect your humanity in V5. And I'm like, yeah, but she is newly a vampire, and she still like thinks like a person. She's not even a year dead. She's not even like 6 months dead at this point. So she's still thinking like a person, and it still is a person to her, or was a person. And there's still weird like reconciliation stuff with that. You don't turn into a vampire and then the next night you're like super fine with murdering people and other vampires or things, oh God, I could go on and on about how Annabelle has been treated by people who watch LA by Night. Anyway, Annabelle kills him, name forgotten, and also doesn't matter really. And then the hunters attack, the Second Inquisition. So boom, we got more attacks going on. This time it's the hunters. It's not Terra this time. Times it's the hunters. I should also say that another, not that they give this reason, but another reason that Jasper could also not be here is because Baron Abrams told him he needed to do something, right? All right, so plant that idea in your mind. So, boom, the Inquisition attacks, or they're not really the Inquisition. They're sort of like a rogue renegade group, but you find that out later. And very easily, Fiona and Miranda doesn't really do anything, but Fiona and everyone else takes care of them. One lives. His name is Greg Demetrios. He's the only one who survives this whole encounter. I don't think they actually get him. It's a woman and another guy that they kill, and I don't think they know. They know that Greg exists because Victor at one point, with the hunter weapons and stuff that they found in there, was able to sort of figure and running tags of these SUVs and stuff, was able to figure out who the people are, as well as conversing with Fiorenza Savona, again, his Malwa. She's another Ventru, she's also a canon character. I think she's in Mexico City, Prince of Mexico City or whatever, and she also is able to find out information and give it to Victor about these people. So he knows their names, and he knows their general backgrounds. Victor starts interrogating them and starts trying to get as much information out of them as he possibly can by using their own families and stuff. And I don't know exactly what happens, but I think the place gets firebombed. Either the Second Inquisition people self-immolate, which I don't think is what happens, or Greg is actually out there throwing firebombs into Le Chat Noir, which I think is the more likely scenario here. Because they said he wasn't captured, he wasn't in there, he was their sort of man on the outside. And so the place, Le Chat Noir, burns to the ground, it catches on fire, everyone flees. The two Inquisition agents are dead inside, and Greg is the only one not dead. And, a deal needs to be struck with Miranda. It sort of kind of was before the chaos ensued, and they promised to have more talks about it later and to work stuff out later, whatever. It's really not relevant. They try and make it relevant, it tries. There are moments where Miranda, the actress who played Miranda, does not appear again in LA by Night. She appears in a little vignette for 15 seconds at one point, but she doesn't appear again. But she is mentioned a few times, and it's just it doesn't pan out. It doesn't go anywhere, so it's not super relevant. It's very obvious that Miranda is only tolerating Victor and only working with Victor so long as it serves her, and that she has no issues working with the Camarilla if that serves her better. So whatever. It's just, it's very duplicitous. It's very ministry coded. It's whatever. Whoop, wardrobe change. All right, so after leaving Le Chat Noir to the fireball that it became, the coterie race to go rescue Jasper as the Nosferatu that Annabelle killed tried to use his possible being in danger as leverage. It turns out he was lying, but we'll get to that. So they know that Jasper lives because Nick, am I remembering his name? Nick told them that that's where he lives. He lives under Griffith Park. So they head down there, and it quickly becomes apparent. They head through the sewers and things, and it quickly becomes apparent that Jasper lives in some sort of M.C. Escher nightmare labyrinth. Now, the labyrinth is something that fans of Vampire the Masquerade and of the lore would immediately recognize as being one of Zelios's labyrinths that he's created all over the world. And Jasper being a Nosferatu, it makes sense that the player, Alex Ward, took the Zelios lore sheet as something for Jasper's character, because it gives you, one of the dots, I believe, gives you access to the labyrinth. Anyway, they traverse through it, and eventually they come to how just absolutely eldritch nightmare this labyrinth is, with corridors that don't make any sense, and, ways forward that seem like they're there, and then they disappear, and stairs that go nowhere, and stuff like that as they're looking for them. And they eventually, of course, they get lost. They also have, it's important to note, they also have Victor's, not ghoul, but Victor's, the ghoul of Fiorenza Savona with them, Ebe. Ebe is Fiorenza Savona's ghoul, but she was given to Victor to utilize, but she technically doesn't belong to him. But she's there with them. She's his enforcer. She's his driver. This role will later be replaced by Campbell, but we'll talk about Campbell when we talk about season 2. Down there, they eventually run into a werewolf. Now, this was in 2018, so there was no Werewolf 5th edition yet. And so, the rules and the lore of 5th edition did not exist the way that it exists now. You can also see this in Werewolf the Apocalypse, Earthblood, and Heart of the Forest, where there are some things in there that just don't work anymore with 5th edition, and there's even a disclaimer now on the website that says this was made before 5th edition, blah blah blah. Strikes a Chord is played by Jason Miller. There's really nothing in there that says that it doesn't mesh with W5. Plays a werewolf called Strikes a Chord, and he of course he's stuck down there. He found his way down there. Probably he's a bone gnawer, and he was probably searching for, he probably thought it was a Black Spiral Dancer labyrinth, because that's a thing. That's werewolf lore. If you want to know more about werewolf lore, I guess I could make some werewolf videos about it. Let me know in the comments if you want me to make werewolf lore videos. I've made some, but they are older edition lore, and I'm not going back to making older edition lore stuff. But if you want to know about Black Spiral Dancers as they exist in W5, leave me a comment and I'll see what I can do for you. Anyway, Strikes a Chord was probably down there searching for or investigating if this was a Black Spiral Dancer labyrinth or not, especially because it's in Griffith Park, which infamously is territory of werewolves in Los Angeles. They run into him, and he's in full Krynos mode, Krynos form, his war form. And he begins attacking them. Annabelle holds herself up pretty well. She punches the werewolf right in the face. Victor and Nellie fares okay. Nellie doesn't engage with him. Victor does get slashed pretty brutally, and Ebe does suffer from the delirium. And that's a thing that can happen to mortals when they see a werewolf. Whether they see them shift into other forms, or see them in their Krynos form, that is a thing that will happen to humans. So she suffers from the delirium, where she's just mindlessly afraid and can't really remember anything. But eventually, Strikes a Chord realizes that he is he may be a werewolf, but he's also outnumbered, and also these people found their way in, so maybe they can help him find their way out. So he does become human again, shift to his Homid form, and Ebe doesn't remember that he was a werewolf. She can't physically. That's what the delirium is. And they agree to sort of help each other figure out how the fuck to get out of this place. And he talks about being a bone gnawer, which is one of the tribes. It's sort of, if I had to make it akin to vampire, a bone gnawer is sort of like the Nosferatu / maybe city gangrel of the werewolves. They're one of my favorite tribes. They're like top 3 favorite tribes. And they offhandedly mention that Malkavian, they somehow got on the topic of Malkavians, and Strikes a Chord very humorously says, yeah, we have some crazy werewolves too, which is in reference to the Silverfangs, which infamously, for whatever reason, the Silverfangs eventually, as they get older, they eventually start getting a little bit, a few screws loose in the mind. Whether that just comes from their inclination towards leadership and all the stress that puts on them or not is not really said in W5. But I thought it was really funny. I enjoyed it a lot. What's interesting though, and I think this is again, there are certain things in season 1 that you just sort of have to let go. I mentioned it before with Eva's characterization direction and how that changes in the future seasons, but also the way the labyrinth works will change. Not even in the next season, it will change in Jasper's epilogue, because eventually the coterie stumble upon a Nosferatu in torpor, who will be revealed to be the Zelios, the master mason, the person who created these labyrinths, very infamous in Vampire the Masquerade lore. He was at one point a primogen of New York. He's been all over the place, all over the world, doing things all over the place for many centuries. But they eventually come across his torpored body above, which in suspended above is the ley lines, right? Later on in the seasons, including Jasper's epilogue in season 1, in order to reach the nexus of the labyrinth, which is where the ley lines reside, you have to pass through a mirror to get there. And they don't have to do this. And even to get to Zelios, they have to pass through a mirror to get to him. He's not just like hanging around or whatever. So I think there's like a weird little disconnect here, because in Jasper's own backstory, he claims that he wandered through the labyrinth and found Zelios, and the coterie wanders through the labyrinth and finds Zelios. But upon later seasons, in order to get to Zelios, you have to pass through the mirror, because eventually Zelios gets taken by the Tremere, who passed through the mirror. And before that, obviously, they didn't find him before passing through the mirror. But those are things that I have no issue with, like letting go or moving past, because one, the nature of the labyrinth in and of itself is totally incomprehensible. It's totally illogical. You can't really put physics and logistics on top of it. Two, when you do these things as a storyteller, you're trying to see what fits the vibe the best. And sometimes you get these like thoughts later on, or shower thoughts, or whatever, daydream thoughts, I don't even know what you would call them, where you like come up with how it works logically a little bit later, or you just like the way it works. It makes better sense to you this way, and you just roll with it that way from now on. But either way, they run across Zelios and these ley lines. What's interesting is I believe Annabelle touches the ley lines, but nothing happens to her. Maybe it's because she didn't try to manipulate them, and she doesn't have any blood sorcery. Later on, these ley lines will get touched by Eva, and she will get damaged from them, but she does attempt to manipulate them, so maybe that's the difference there. So eventually they come back to, they don't know that Jasper has a haven outside the labyrinth, so they're just looking for him. They don't know the layout of this place. They weren't aware that this labyrinth existed underneath Griffith Park, and they definitely weren't aware that Jasper lived here. But eventually they come back from the other side, I guess, of the sewers. Again, when we come back to the labyrinth in other seasons, we go through Jasper's Haven, then through the sewers, then to the labyrinth. Whereas this was sewers, then labyrinth with no haven in between. And somehow they get out of the labyrinth and are back at where Jasper's Haven would be. Whether they just did a big loop or a big circle is unknown and really doesn't matter. But eventually they do that, and they get out to where Jasper's Haven is. Strikes a chord, pieces out, because he's like, finally, I've been trapped down here for 3 days. I gotta get the hell out of here. And he does. And he does. It never comes up again. I mean, it does come up again, but it never like amounts to anything, unfortunately. But Victor does like reach out to Strikes a chord and says like, hey, maybe we can work something out. I'll do a favor. I helped you get out of here. You hurt me when I wasn't, meaning anything negative towards you. Maybe at a future point we can do some favors for each other. And Strikes a chord does agree to like bring it to his pack, but unfortunately nothing comes of it, which was super bummer. They go into Jasper's Haven, and they find a woman in a cage, and the woman in the cage is Tara Kearney, which I've spoken about before. She's the former Baron of San Diego, then became the Prince of San Diego when she abandoned the Anarchs for the Camarilla after the Second Inquisition, Michigas, and then obviously that sparked a civil war, and she fled San Diego and came here to Los Angeles. And so she's been captured, and this was sort of the reasoning behind why Jasper wasn't in the last episode, because Baron Abrams had captured Tara somehow, and he wanted Jasper to like keep her locked up in his haven until he could come and collect her and deal with her in whichever way he saw fit, as she was captured within his domain. And he has her in a cage, and Tara does not reveal who she is. No one knows who she is, but she claims to be just a regular person, and that Jasper's been feeding off of her and keeping her locked up here, and she's very convincing. Jason does a very good job being very convincing that she's just a regular person, and I guess none of them attempted to sort of really look at her to see if she was kindred or not, because I guess maybe they wouldn't consider Jasper to be a blood leech, that he feeds only on kindred vitae, even though none of them have seen him feed. Again, not unusual. There are a lot of vampires that don't like to have other people watch them feed. But eventually it becomes super clear when Jasper reemerges into his haven that this is the former Baron of San Diego and keeping her in a cage and has been feeding off of her. And he does have to reveal to his coterie that he is a blood leech, which, some of them take more offense to than others. Annabelle seems to be taking the most offense that he's keeping her there, but honestly, she doesn't really know the background story of Tara Kearney and why she's dangerous. And also she's not used to following orders from a Baron in the same way that the other three are. For all intents and purposes, Annabelle has only known Victor to be her Baron because he became Baron a few days after she joined the coterie, and Victor is more like her coterie mate than her Baron, although technically if she lives in the valley, he is her Baron, and so she's just not used to taking orders, plus she's a Bruja on top of that. But she's more concerned about Tara and wants to let her go, and this, that, and the other thing. And Victor and Nellie are much more concerned with the blood leech problem, because that is a huge issue. There is no vampire around that is super okay with you. They're more obviously much more okay with you feeding off of mortals, as long as you do it in a way that keeps the masquerade. But there's no vampire that's super happy with you feeding off of other vampires, for multiple reasons. But one of them being diablerie is something that all vampires fear and worry about, that your life essence could be sucked out and imported is the only word I can think of into another vampire, and you might survive it and you might not. If you do survive it, you're in someone else's body forever. So it's none of it's good all the way around. But eventually they sort of, get over it. Baron Abrams sends some of his people to come and collect Tara. They take her away, and these kindred had been invited to the Succubus Club. Fiorenza calls up Victor and says hey, I got you an invite to the Succubus Club. Word on the street is that your enemy, I forget his name again, Billy Blaine? Is it Billy Blaine? Maybe. I'm just call him Blaine. I know the last name is Blaine. I forget his name again because he's so inconsequential. The Succubus Club, which is a moving vampire party, right, is run by one of the most infamous toreador, Victoria Ash. Victoria Ash was embraced in the 17th century or something like that. She used to be a courtesan or a lady of the evening, if you will. Victoria is a very enigmatic character. She, again, I really hope the clan novels aren't true, because there are some really terrible, Sasha Vikos does some really terrible things to Victoria Ash. So, and not because I have anything with Sasha Vikos and Victoria Ash having a rivalry or Sasha Vikos being terrible or anything like that, but just the way in which it is written, I could talk forever about how much I hate the clan novels. The way in which it was written is very reminiscent of Victoria's own background, of being a person who used her body in order to, let's be honest, in order to survive. What do they say? It's the world's oldest occupation, right? And for some people, back then and now, it's the only way to make any sort of a living for themselves, to survive. And in the clan novels, what happens to Victoria via Sasha Vikos is it's almost mocking or using that against her in order to harm her, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally as well. It's real horrible. I hope it's not true. But she was at one point the Primogen of Atlanta during this time in the clan novels. And she's just extensively well known and well traveled, and in essence pretty well respected by most Camarilla courts for her insight, her tastes, her ability to bring in people into the domain, all these things that she's just super, super talented with. Really a courtesan of the highest caliber. The Succubus Club has been around forever. At one time, Helena, the infamous Toreador, I think she's a Methuselah. She is like a 4th or 5th generation or something like that. Has at one time was running the Succubus Club. It's just something that sort of passed. I don't know if it's passed down from Toreador to Toreador. I don't think there's any like hard and fast rules with it, but it's like a great honor to be hosting or to be the ME, like the master of events of the Succubus Club. But the coterie all go. Jasper wears a bow tie and Victor wears something of Jasper's. It's my liner. Nellie looks amazing, of course, with her crown, and Annabelle even gets dressed up, dolled up for the first time. And they head to the Succubus Club. They have some fun with Victoria Ash. And again, this is no... I know it just sounded like I was super defending Victoria Ash, but I'm under no illusion. Victoria is a very old... And she's also a very stereotypical Toreador, where she wants everyone to pay attention to her and do what she wants, whatever brings her eyes pleasure in the moment, so to speak. So she does enforce her will upon Jasper. He forces her majesty upon Jasper to force him to moonwalk on the dance floor in front of a bunch of kindred, which is horrible. It's taking away someone's free will. Horrible. I will go die on the hill that presence and dominate are the scariest abilities in Vampire the Masquerade. It's also here that they meet Eva. Eva was also invited, and she very funnily drinks blood out of her cup by dipping her finger in it and just drinking it that way. And she reveals to Annabelle and Jasper, who happens to be there for the conversation, that she knew who Annabelle was already. Eva basically infers that every kindred in like any major domain owes Carver, there's at least one kindred that owes Carver a boon. And she owed Carver a boon. So Carver asked her to come and protect Annabelle and put like some like blood magic on her to protect her. I guess to keep her safe from Nick coming after her, I guess. Of course, Annabelle ended up escaping and everything. So that whole thing in Griffith Park in the very first episode that I already mentioned, Eva basically didn't have to do any of that. She already knew who Annabelle was. And what's interesting is that in Griffith Park, in the very first episode, Eva says Bruja of the 13th generation, right? Which implies that Carver is the 12th generation. And here, Eva says, I already knew who you were, I already knew your clan, blah, blah. She doesn't say like, oh, and also I lied about your generation, you're actually a lower generation than 13th. Because Annabelle has much better abilities, has gained much more power than the average 13th generation vampire, which is the highest generation you can be before you're a thin blood. Jason has inferred in the comment sections, and if I can find somewhere in the comment, I don't know if I'm going to go stomping through all the comment sections, but if Jason has implied that like Eva was lying, that Annabelle's actually of a lower generation, because like Carver doesn't seem like someone of 12th generation, again, which is like super high. Here's what I think happened. I think that Annabelle was 13th generation because of the 5th edition book, and the 5th edition book encourages like fledglings, like brand new vampires, to be either 12th or 13th generation, right? And I think 13th generation was picked because, again, 5th edition has sort of moved, like everything's sort of stripped down. We're not dealing with elders anymore. We're not dealing with super powerful Methuselahs. We're dealing with street level young vampires, right? Who are just embraced in the last, let's say 20 years or so. I mean, there are rules where you can do a little bit older than that. And there are upcoming books coming where you can do even older now, which is several years later. But, in essence, the original intention was young vampires on the street level, you know, the power is way, way above them, so far above them, they couldn't crane their necks high enough to see it. And so what I think was the intention was to have Annabelle be that. But here's what I also think. I think that Jason didn't know how long LA by Night would last, didn't know if it would be successful. So I think Jason was giving them the chance, like giving them a lot of XP, either at the end of, you know, like a few episodes would go by and give them XP, or at the end of the season gave them a bunch of XP that they could spend if they, you know, did a season 2. And I think in order to compensate for that, Jason said, and also because Carver is just implied to be much more influential than he is, and it's hard for a 12th generation vampire to be that influential. It just was in retrospect or retroactively that Jason was like, Annabelle really shouldn't be 13th. Annabelle should be maybe 10th. You know, and Carver be maybe 9th. That's my personal belief. I highly welcome Jason to come into the comments and disagree with me and tell me all the ways that I'm wrong. I encourage it. I love it. Anyway, at the Succubus Club, Billy Blaine that's even his name, shows up, and Victoria already knows about it. I guess she heard about it from Fiorenza, and also Victor lays it out for her that he like wants to take care of him. Again, this doesn't amount to anything, but Victoria's like, all right, I'm gonna do this for you, and you're gonna do a favor for me. Doesn't amount to anything. She doesn't ask for anything at any point. Maybe she will at some point in the future. They kill Blaine right on the floor in front of people, and what's interesting is that because vampires need to feed, there are mortals at the Succubus Club that are there. They're called blood dolls that are there just to be fed upon. And it's a great big display. Victor shoots him with the Ralphus gun, which is an incendiary round. There's a hunter weapon. Everyone's using their powers, and it just causes a big old ruckus. And Victoria declares that after it's over, that every mortal at the Succubus Club needs to die. Now, that is not necessarily out of the ordinary, especially for Camarilla vampires who will do anything to keep the masquerade. Anything. Annabelle has a huge problem with this, obviously, but there's not a whole lot she can do against the multitude of vampires gathered here at the Succubus Club, and she can only watch in horror. And that is a big sticking point for Annabelle coming into the future. And it's also important to note that Eva remains to watch the carnage. And again, it's not something characteristically Eva would be okay with. She doesn't ever mention again. It never comes up again, even when Eva's being played by Josephine McAdam. No one ever brings it up saying like, hey, what did you think about Succubus Club? It just seems like a moot point at that point, probably. It seems like a weird time to just randomly bring it up. But that's, again, one of those things where season one is just sort of, it's any season one of any actual play that you run, whether you're running it community-wise or obviously running it at a caliber like this, is just going to have its hiccups. It's going to have its sort of characterizations that are going to drastically change, or certain plot points that are going to flip around on you, because what is most important is that the story that you're telling is the best story possible, right? But I just wanted to point those things out because we're doing a huge retrospective of LA by Night, so why not? All right, to wrap up season one, we have some epilogues from each member of the coterie. Starting first with Victor. Basically, it's just a conversation between him and Ebe. And as I already mentioned, Ebe is a ghoul that belongs to Fiorenza Savona. She informs Victor that she's going back to Fiorenza, and that she's been a ghoul for 100 years, or either that or she is 100 years old. And of course, she doesn't look 100 years old. She's played by Nora Ibrahim. She can't really take this anymore, that she has done all these things for, not just Fiorenza, but for other vampires over these years, over the century. And she's ready for her just rewards, and that's to become a vampire. She's not going to become a vampire right away. She's going to come back in season 2 still as a ghoul, but after that appearance, she will come back as a vampire. And you should already know, but I'll talk about what type of vampire she comes back as later. And basically the epilogue is just Victor saying goodbye to his friend, that he's come to deeply care about Ebe and her feelings, and that he just wants her to have everything that she wants and needs, and says goodbye to her and thanks her for the loyal service that she's given him. And as I mentioned, she will be replaced by Victor's ill-fated ghoul Campbell in the future. Nellie's is a little bit more pertinent to the future of LA by Night. She meets with Baron Abrams very briefly, and he does mention things about Victor. He does mention the Succubus Club. He mentions that Victoria Ash is going to go marry a very infamous Banu Hakim named Tigirius. I think that's how you say that properly. They're calling it the Vermilion Wedding. It's going to be a blood wedding. And it's to cement the newfound peace accord or partnership between the Camarilla and the Ashira, which are the vampire sect that exists in areas of the Middle East, or areas that are predominantly of the Islamic faith. And he also mentions the feeling of the beckoning. Very briefly, Abrams. It's not written anywhere in any official record of how old Abrams is, and It's also not confirmed anywhere the feeling of the beckoning, which is this pulling, this calling to the Gehenna War, what exactly the criteria is or how some older vampires avoid it. For example, Tigurius is a very old vampire. He's almost a Methuselah. He's like fifth generation. And Victoria herself is also quite old, but neither of them are feeling the beckoning as far as we know. But Abrams is, and Abrams was at one time, as a mortal, a Hollywood film producer or director or something like that. And so obviously he's not nearly as old as they are, but whether his sire was someone of a very low generation, we don't really know. He sends Nellie off after they have their little meeting. And Nellie is Nellie owns a fashion chain of stores called Thorn. Get it? Because she's a rose. And she's having a new opening of one of her stores. And Greg Demetrios shows up, the only surviving member of this little Second Inquisition cell that came after the coterie multiple times. He's the one that firebombed Le Chat Noir. Admits that they were operating rogue, right? They were part of a government organization that didn't want to believe what they believed, which were that the supernatural exists and that, vampires are real, blanks, as he calls them. Or at the very least, if they didn't want to admit that they were real, they didn't want Greg and his two now dead compatriots to be involved in their operations. So they went off on their own, and they basically went AWOL. Greg is afraid of them coming after him, and so he wants Nellie to protect him, and he's willing to do whatever she needs for her to protect him. He finds her to be the most, from his observations, the most human of all of them, but I think he hasn't paid enough attention to Annabelle, or maybe he feels like Annabelle is like not established enough as Nellie is, where Nellie is actually an established presence in Los Angeles. And so she does agree to protect him and keep it secret from her coterie in exchange for him drinking her blood. And it's pretty obvious that Greg doesn't know what that means, to drink her blood, when she says she has sealed the deal, and she just like pricks her finger and offers him a drop, and he takes it. And of course, then he immediately feels much better about his decision to to offer his services to Nellie in exchange for keeping him alive. He feels very devoted to her, as is the way with the blood bond. Jasper, who I should have mentioned originally, actually his is the first epilogue. I just forgot that for a second. I always think his is the last epilogue. I don't know why, but then I remembered Annabelle's is the last one. So I'm fairly certain Jasper's is the first one. Whoopsies. Jasper, after everything that happened, Succubus Club, didn't really affect him that much. He meets with X and talks about Annabelle and how, Los Angeles is different now for him because of Annabelle. And also, of course, X is calling on his boon for babysitting Annabelle at Jasper's request. And he requests that Jasper teaches him how to moonwalk, calling back to when Jasper moonwalked on the dance floor under duress from, under domination from Victoria Ash, which of course then does that. I mean, to be honest, and it makes total sense in Jasper's characterization. The mass murder at Succubus Club didn't bother him as much as someone taking over his free will and forcing him to dance on the dance floor for her own pleasure and enjoyment. X, who was not present at the Succubus Club, saw it in the way that Malkavians and those who possess high levels of auspex, can use premonition, see things beyond the veil, especially Malkavians, who don't even have to have dots and auspex to do that. It's natural in their blood. Saw Jasper doing the moonwalk at the club. Of course, Jasper does say that he was under duress doing it, but he promises that he will teach X how to moonwalk in exchange for having watched Annabelle, which is a very sweet scene, and it sort of establishes it's the foundational establishment of Jasper and X's relationship, which was only just mentioned when X was in the third and fourth episode, just saying that like Jasper and I are friends, but it becomes pretty obvious that X might be Jasper's only legitimate friend in Los Angeles, which is both sweet and sad. Later on, Jasper heads off to the Griffith College campus. Again, as I mentioned, that's a shared domain of the coterie. On the college campus is Jasper's ex-girlfriend. Ex only because he died and became a vampire. I need to make that perfectly clear. Her name's Chloe. You'll find that out later when he talks to Chloe about what happened to him, but he was essentially ambushed in his apartment and became a Nosferatu. He never really says, and he doesn't know, as far as we know, who did it. If he did know, or if he found out later, he does mention a name much, much later, which I will mention in season 5 when he does mention it, when Annabelle decides to leave and go to New York. So whether he found out who it was, or he found out after this point, when he speaks to Chloe about what happened to him in season 2, it's unknown. But as far as we know in this moment, Jasper was ambushed in his apartment for, quote unquote, the bad things that he used to do to get by in Los Angeles. Again, it's very vague. We don't know what he was doing that would cause the ire or attention of any kindred. And he was turned into a Nosferatu, which is a very painful embrace, as the Nosferatu become twisted and deformed in some manner or fashion. It's very different for every Nosferatu. So the embrace takes longer and is much more painful than for the average kindred. And then he was just abandoned. He didn't know what happened. He decided to either fake his own death, or someone else had faked his death. Again, it's a little bit unclear. He claims that when he eventually came to himself after finding the labyrinth, and we'll talk more about his embrace later. Eventually, when he came to himself and realized and came to terms with what had happened to him, he found out that he was declared dead. And so I guess we take from that whoever embraced him did that. Gave him a quote-unquote mask, which is a merit you can take. So obviously Chloe thought he died. There was no breaking up between the two of them, because 1, he doesn't look like himself anymore, and 2, Chloe thought he was dead. And so he's been following her around, spying on her for 5 years that he's been a kindred. She's gone to school. She's trying to become a journalist. She's met someone else, which he learns as he sits in the coffee shop, unseen by her and her friend, Diane. And she talks about this new guy that she's dating, Dave, I believe, and how, he wants to move forward with their relationship, and she's afraid of moving on because she has no closure with what happened with Jasper. Obviously, it was very sudden and with no explanation at all. And Jasper takes it upon himself because I think in essence, not only does he want Chloe to be happy, I think there's a part of him that wants to let go of Chloe, but it's hard because she's a touchstone, right? That's, again, a mechanic of Vampire the Masquerade, where every vampire needs to have a touchstone, a person who matters to them, and when bad things happen to them, it affects their humanity. And being around them also is necessary. You need to be around them in order to maintain your relationship to the human you used to be. Otherwise, you become a total monster, and that's essentially a game over in Vampire the Masquerade. You become a white when you lose all your dots in humanity. And so he decides to write on a napkin, slip it onto the bartender's tray, and it says something to the effect of, you should move on. Sorry, I was listening, but your friend's right. You should move on and try and be happy. And it doesn't say it's from Jasper, but it's written in the first person as if it is Jasper speaking. And this is always and obviously she recognizes his handwriting. And it's always one of those things where I think to it's great. It's great fodder for a game. I love it. If I was a storyteller here, I would be grinning from ear to ear. But it's always one of those things where I wonder in my head, what was Jasper thinking? What was the outcome he was hoping for? Chloe seems like an outrageously rational person. She seems like she's a journalist, right? She's a truth finder. That's sort of her whole gig. And so she doesn't seem like the type of person who would interpret a random napkin showing up written in Jasper's handwriting as being a sign from beyond, which is what I have to assume Jasper was hoping she would think. But instead, she becomes completely freaked out. She immediately wants to end the conversation with Diane and get the hell out of this coffee shop, because what she's going to end up doing is she's going to stop at nothing until she finds Jasper. We'll get to that when we talk about season 2. The last epilogue is with Annabelle, and it's, in my opinion, it's probably my favorite epilogue of season 1. I always have a favorite epilogue of every season, and this is for sure my favorite. After X leaves Jasper, he goes and meets Annabelle at Santa Monica. He takes her under the water, so you can see the lights of the Ferris wheel under the water. And of course, vampires don't have to breathe. And it's very important later on that you remember this exchange of X wanting to go under the water. I don't know if this was pre-planned. I don't know how much of X's background was written or discussed, but it when you hear about it in season 4, it becomes devastatingly sad that he always wants to go under the water. They do that and they come back, and Annabelle learns how X feeds, which is he prefers to feed on the sleeping transient community or the unhoused community of Los Angeles, which is a predator type called Sandman. He prefers to feed on sleeping people. And he explains it away that it gives them pleasure, that he receives sustenance from them and they receive pleasure because the kiss, the bite, is pleasurable. I always switch around between Eva and X of who is my favorite character. And in this moment, as I'm talking about him, X is my favorite character. I love him so much. And Xander Jeanneret portrays him better than I could ever imagine in my wildest dreams if someone had brought me X's character with the background the way it's written. I couldn't imagine anyone playing anyone else. X gives Annabelle a premonition when he holds her necklace that she wears. It's a necklace given to her by Eleanor, her girlfriend. It's a premonition of a heart that spins wildly and then with a red flame, and then stops spinning and the flame goes out and then the flame becomes blue. And it's very clearly anyone who is reading between the lines and, again, is a huge lore nerd like me and listens to every possible word that everyone says at all times in the game, that he's describing Eleanor becoming kindred. A beating heart and a red flame, red like the blood that runs in her body. And then the heart stops. And the heart starts reversing in the opposite way and the flame turns blue because she's dead. And the heart's not beating anymore. Annabelle doesn't understand this interpretation, and to be honest, if X does understand this interpretation, he doesn't tell her. And Annabelle goes home to talk to Eleanor, and Eleanor is super aware that she's a vampire, as we discussed in the beginning. She and Eleanor and Mark did a lot of research, but I'm guessing more Eleanor and Annabelle than Mark, as Mark is much more surprised about Annabelle's actual undead state later on in season 3. Annabelle tries to tell Eleanor that she needs to stay away from her. She tries to do the things that Nellie and Victor and Jasper warned her to do or instructed her to do or encouraged her to do. She tries to impart to Eleanor that kindred society is dangerous and violent, and that Annabelle tries to tell her that she's dead. There's no coming back from this. She's cold, her heart doesn't beat, and her blood doesn't run. Eleanor insists that there's nothing that Annabelle could do that would make her stop loving her, dead or not. Eleanor wants to be in this world with Annabelle. She doesn't want to be outside of it. She doesn't want to be shut out anymore. She doesn't want to let go of her. Annabelle had the opportunity to put her foot down, to do the hard thing and push Eleanor away, but she couldn't. And as I've stated before, Annabelle doesn't get nearly enough grace. Annabelle is so young and still in almost every way so very human. And the epilogue ends with them kissing and declaring their love for each other. And it's unknown what happens to Eleanor. She suddenly is gone, and Annabelle doesn't want to discuss what happens to Eleanor. And for the longest time, it was assumed that Eleanor might be dead, that Annabelle had embraced Eleanor and maybe staked her, that Annabelle had embraced Eleanor and, much like Carver, had essentially abandoned her, or Eleanor had run away, or something to that effect. But we will not find out for certain that Eleanor is still unalive until season 3 when we talk about that. But this video has already gone on long enough because every episode is about 3 hours and I ramble. So I think, unfortunately, if I was to make a retrospective of the entire season, I think of the entire series, rather, I think this would end up being like a 6-hour video, and I don't think I can do that. So I think I'm going to make a series of these of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 seasons, and we'll do it season by season, and hopefully that won't bother everyone. I will put up this first season like this. Let me know if you've made it all the way through it. Let me know in the comments if you would rather have the next 2, 3, 4, 5 all together in one episode. Or if you want them separate season by season, and then once I've done all the seasons, I will smash them together and upload just for you guys a full retrospective of all the episodes together. I'll edit it so it looks like it's never been cut. You let me know in the comments. I want to thank you so much for watching if you have made it this far. I love Ellie by Night. Ellie by Night means everything to me, and I can't wait to talk more about it. I could talk about it till I'm hoarse, which I'm getting.